Hey everybody, it's Mike with On Point Preparedness. From yesterday's live stream, I promised you all a prepping video tonight, and so that's what we're here to do tonight, is talk a little bit about prepping 101, super basic stuff, as well as some of the things that are going on, behind the scenes, or really not even behind the scenes, that are happening in the news right now. I mentioned in my last video that 2020 came off with a bang, that you had the Iranian general assassination, and now there's just a whole slew of news articles that are coming out from that. If we take a look at the Drudge Report, I mean, this is just headlines just from Drudge and a whole lot of other sites. Iranian is eyeing 35 U.S. targets. Trump has 52 rockets, or 52 sites that are targeted for rockets. U.S. troops have already had attacks against them. This is all sort of inevitable if you think about it. Over the past couple years, there's been just a whole ton of major events where, myself included, and a lot of people just thought that this was the breaking point. We had North Korea crisis where they were literally lobbing missiles over the islands of Japan, and we thought, like, it can't get worse than this. There was the Syrian civil war where Syria was more or less like a proxy war. Also, Ukraine as a proxy war, right, where bigger countries are using smaller countries to sort of have a war against the bigger country, like Russia and the U.S. are essentially at war, or Iran and the U.S. are essentially at war, and they're sending in operatives secretly into Ukraine or into Syria, and they're essentially fighting under the radar. So it's not a formal war, it's more of a proxy. These things have been going on for quite some time. And so, in my opinion, and a lot of people's opinion, is war is essentially inevitable. It really, really is. There has to be a breaking point. There has to be some kind of black swan event which really triggers this whole thing and starts the cascade of big events like stock market collapse, maybe world war. It's quite interesting because, oh heck, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, if you would have brought these things up, talking about global stock market collapse or global war, it was fairly conspiratorial. But nowadays, it's actually commonplace. People are talking about it. I know, even in my workplace, there are people that are openly talking about the prospects of global war. And so these big countries, Iran, China, Russia, the US, the Japan, Koreas, they're all really just, they're poking. They're poking each other, and no one wants to jump full on into war. I think that there's just, an apprehension to get into war in the first place because no one likes war, although the people that are the elite, it's good for business for them. But they're holding off because, war's not good. But I think more so than that, they're holding off so that they can strategically get in the best position before war breaks out. Right, they're doing these little pokes and prods, and if you actually listen to Vladimir Putin and some of the comments he has made, he's pretty flat out honest about what the scenarios are that are playing out, and the fact that war is inevitable, and that all the players are basically just getting their little pawns in place, and then at the right point, when people feel that they're ready, it's go time. And so I know myself and a lot of subscribers, as well as some of my YouTube peers, we were really taken aback with how quickly things escalated in 2020. I'm going to be going on the A Minute to Midnight show with Tony this Tuesday at 9 p.m. The video will probably be released the next day or 2 days after that. We're going to talk about some of the things that are going on in the world right now, as well as prepping. And I just want to give you a little bit of a teaser to that today, because it is important. Again, my faith is that it's prudent to prepare. It was more of like a lifestyle thing for older generations. They were just inherently prepared. It's a very prudent thing to do. And how it relates to faith is that you should prepare. There's a lot of evidence in the Bible where people prepared. Noah is a good example. Joseph storing grain is an example. There's just tons and tons of examples of God warning his people to prepare, that there's going to be famine, that there's going to be pestilence, that there's going to be bad times. And so it's a knowledgeable and prudent thing to do. But a lot of people don't know where to start. So we're going to do a 101. super, super general. I'm not going to get into too many details. I'll just give you some resources so you can at least start this journey with me. And then maybe on, this live stream platform is actually working out really nice for me. Maybe on a weekly basis now, I'll try to fit in some type of prepping related video along with the ministry and teaching and Bible studies that we do here. So what I wanted to start with is refer you back to an old video that I've got, and look at that. That was July 9th, 2015. I should expand this so you can see it just a little bit better. And maybe I'll get myself off the, let's see here. We'll get myself off the screen so you can also see that too. All right. Oops. And a little bit of difficulty here. Let me see here. There we go. So what I shared in this video was all about categorization of your preps. Again, prepping can be very overwhelming. And as it relates to your faith as well, I just want you all to be aware that don't prepare to the point that it puts you into bondage. Before I actually got saved and I was doing this channel, On Point Preparedness, and I was doing all the prepper stuff, it can actually put you into bondage. It can put you into an incredible amount of fear. And the bondage that I speak of is that there is so much to know and do that it starts to stress you out. You'll say, well, I need to get this, I need to get that, I need to get this. And so you start worrying about the accumulation of stuff. And then when you have this stuff, you have to train with it. And so you start worrying about the hours and the commitment that you have to do to ensure that you have the right medical skills, that you're training in terms of security. If you have ham radio or some other type of communication plan or device, that you're training on that you have a place to go. It can get very, very burdensome. And so as people of faith, as Christians, we have to be very mindful of that before we start engaging in this. It should be something that is just a way of life. And it shouldn't consume us, and it shouldn't get in the way of our spiritual walk and our spiritual journey. With that being said, here is just a very simplistic way to look at it. There is something known as the 3-3-3 rule. A lot of people in the preparedness community know about it. It says you'll only survive 3 minutes without air, 3 hours without shelter, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. It's sort of a 3-3-3-3. And I've added a little bit of additional things here. Again, since this was 2015, I do have some added categories, but we're just going to cover things in relation to air, shelter, water, food. And then I've added things like security. I've added medical and hygiene and health, something that is very much overlooked when you are preparing. Communications. More the advanced communication is what's called ham radio or amateur radio. We can talk a little bit about that on future sessions on this channel. But it can be just as simple as a communication plan with your family, that first we're going to try to contact each other via cell phones. If that doesn't work and the internet is still up, we're going to use Facebook Messenger. And if there is absolutely no way we can digitally communicate, we're going to meet at this location. There's a whole bunch of things that revolve around communications. Travel planning, where are you going to go? That is a very difficult thing because a lot of people don't have a place to go, and so that's why it's good to be in fellowship with like-minded Christians who know the signs of the times and know the season that we're in, and really band together. Again, because it's going to get rough. Scripture says, here's to the patience and perseverance of the saints. And so if you can find people that are like-minded and you can get into a community and group with them, not only for spiritual growth, but for preparedness, I think that's wonderful. And then also some other things that people don't look at is community aspects, mental health. That is going to be something that's really big in these types of scenarios. Actually, what's interesting is as I've been reading through the Bible, I just finished a plan. It was read the Bible in 90 days. It took me a year. I utterly failed that 90-day mark. But as I read through the entire Bible and I was looking at some of the sieges that happened against Jerusalem, they are bad. They are really, really bad. You can also read up on the siege of Jerusalem by the Romans in 70 AD and how bad that was. It is really, really bad in terms of mental anguish and emotional anguish that people are going to go through during that time. And so really, this is actually a much understated category in the preparedness community, mental and emotional health. I'll just give you a really quick example. If you have kids and you're the man of the household, one of the things that you're probably going to be thinking about is, oh, I got to have my bug out bag. I got to have all these physical items of food, water, shelter. But more than that, I mean, those things are important. Something that is just as important as that may be some of the toys. Like if your child has a toy that is something that's a comfort to them. My daughter has a little lamb, and her name's Lammy. That is a core thing that I have to remember if we ever get into a situation where we need to leave the house. My daughter would be an absolute wreck if she didn't have that comfort item. And so really, you need to start structuring all the different types of categories that you think that you need something in order to, be prepared, and then bracket that out slowly. So what I did in this prior video, again, it's linked in the YouTube description as well, but I took an example here. Maybe shelter was one. Let's just go ahead and take a look. But those big categories can be segregated into much smaller categories. So you see here shelter and water, which was two of our big ones. Shelter you can think about in terms of a whole variety of different subsectors. The clothes on your back. If you're going to have a bug out bag, what are you going to bring in there? There's going to be differences between your clothes in terms of the summer versus the winter. So are you cycling out the clothes that are in your bag? The locations that you have, that is technically shelter. If you have pre-planned locations to go to, and what is the weather like and what is the condition of the shelter. Bushcraft skills can also be part of shelter in terms of having the knowledge to make a shelter if you are unfortunate enough to have, lost it or not brought it. Heating and cooling. So even that has more tiers to it. So again, you can think of heating and cooling as clothes and things like that, but there's also things such as like a wood stove, and then you break out that in terms of having an axe and having a handle and having a sharpener, and what about a saw? And so really it's about, taking some of these just as a starter, taking some of these and then bracketing them out to say, what would I really need? Because if you don't go in this with a plan, it's very, very overwhelming. I actually have a friend here that I met at church, and I was asking her whether she has started to prepare or done anything of that sort, and she said that she wants to, and she's looking forward to it. But again, it's very overwhelming, and so this is the best place to start, is just map it all out, because you don't want to fall in bondage and get completely overwhelmed. And you don't also want this to be a complete money sink. And, there's some people who do have the funds and they do have the availability of spending money on things. And then you'll find yourself at the point where you start to accumulate so much stuff in your home that you realize if you ever have to leave your home, you don't want to be attached to your stuff, which moth and rust can destroy. There's a lot of stories of people having valuables in their home and their home catches on fire and they run back in to save their things. I'm sure there's some people out there that are prepping that have so much investment in their homes in terms of expensive preparedness gear that it's going to mess with their psyche in terms of whether or not to leave when they really should, and they need to leave all that stuff. And so it really, again, comes down to specific faith. So what I wanted to do is just look at some of these categories as it applies to a bug out bag. I think a bug out bag is something that, again, is prudent, not even necessarily for the quote unquote end times or in terms of a huge collapse, but year after year, how many times do we have to look year after year that there are major events where people who are not prepared end up suffering the consequence? Lots of people in Detroit, where the water situation was bad, ended up having to depend on the government for water. If you look at Australia right now, that's actually going to be an amazing case example as it applies to the air category. A lot of people are saying, well, how do I prepare for air? I'll show you a good example there. But in Australia, lots of people are losing their homes, and they've had to get displaced, and they don't have any supplies. A bug out bag would be pretty good in those situations. And so again, end times or anything like that aside, it is a prudent thing to do regardless. So let's go ahead and take a look. I'm going to bring that up on the screen here. Just looking at that air category. And I wanted to show you some of the photos from some of the beaches in Australia and what is going on there. So if you take a look here, let's pull that up. And you can see here, these are pretty astonishing photos. This probably isn't the worst one. I've seen worse than that, where people are all collected on the beaches and you've got this just red sky. But particularly this one right here, you can see that this guy has just it's not even an N95 mask. It's just one of those masks that they give you in the hospital just to basically prevent wet particles from coming out of your mouth. But this isn't doing a whole lot in terms of breathing all that soot and everything that's in that air. And so while he's not going to die if he doesn't have that, I think it is still a prudent thing to prepare for, that you think about the air quality and a variety of events that might happen. And, what should you put in your bug out bag? What should you have in your home? And so let's go ahead and look at my website, which is woefully out of date. It's just onpointpreparedness.net. I don't know if a lot of people know that it's there. A lot of the articles are ancient. It's just been very difficult to try to manage the YouTube channel and replicate that content over and over, between the website and YouTube and every other platform, DTube, when we thought that YouTube was going to go down and started using all these free source websites. But anywho, this one was written on February 16th, 2015. There's probably a lot of updates that I have to it and things that you might not agree with. But again, it's a good start for anyone that hasn't really thought this out yet. And so I just generally talk about, that everyone's needs are different from one person to the next. Definitely we have differences in terms of medicines. There might be some people that have to have medicines where others don't. So again, there's different survival needs. There's different skill levels. Again, we all want to try to increase our skill levels, and maybe perhaps I will do a video showing, some really good survivalists or people that are in the preparedness movement that are YouTube teachers, as well as some of the books that I've learned from, so you can increase your skill level. But if you don't have the time and you're not really going to put in that investment, you can purchase things that are for people that don't have the skills. And that's perfectly fine. It's going to be custom tailored to you. And obviously cost. There's a lot of people that are on a very tight cost budget. But if you are fellowshipping, again, with like-minded Christians that are in your area, we are to give to one another and build each other up. So if there ever comes a situation where we need to help each other out, someone that's better off can help the other one that's not. So going into this list, these are just some ideas. So thinking about that big bracket of items in terms of air, shelter, water, food, I've sort of broken that down into similar categories here in terms of a bug out bag. Again, it's very individualized. I give you a reference here to Creek Stewart, who's, I believe, is a Christian man. He's a really wonderful guy. I went to some of his training sessions, but he has a Build the Perfect Bug Out Bag book. Very inexpensive if you want to go check that out. But you basically get your bag. You don't want to really carry anything that's over maybe a fourth of your total weight. And that's a hard thing because people want to pack things into there. But looking at these categories, again, here's air. There's 3M N95 particulate masks. And you can buy these fairly cheap. And it's good just to have, maybe 2 per person in the family in case of something like this. It would be a good thing to have. I mean, here they don't really have something for their child, and so they're basically just wrapping the child's head in a blanket. It is good to be prepared, especially for your family. Looking at shelter, again, these are just some items that you want to consider. Clothing, especially socks. That's one of the things where if you read about these stories during World War II and trench foot, having a good pair of shoes and having a variety of socks, including I like having a pair of waterproof socks. I think that's very key in terms of having them in your bug out bag. If bugs are an issue in your area, it may sort of sound silly, but bug spray is an incredibly important thing, and it doesn't add a whole lot of weight. If you look at some of these survival shows, one of the things that is just absolutely torturous is that they are getting eaten alive by bugs. And so, again, bug spray, things regarding your sleeping bag and pad, as well as emergency blankets, water. There are some options here that I have in terms of some life straws, which are fairly cheap. Personally, I like these better ones from MSR. I have an MSR Sweetwater Purifier. Even if you end up not using this for a survival situation, honestly, I haven't gone camping in quite a while. That's just because children. I got 3 children, all under the age of 7, and so that is a little bit difficult for me to get out camping anymore. But before I had all the kids, a large majority of this stuff, a fairly good majority of this stuff, I was taking with me on trips, camping trips, or even regular trips. I was taking my bug out bag with me in case there was an emergency while I was on the road. But especially for camping, I mean, these are just the things that I use. And so they're not really perishable items. Some of them are, but a lot of them aren't. They are things that you can actually get use out of. And even if you don't, it is an insurance policy. We spend tons of money on insurance policies for our car, for our home, for health and everything else. And a lot of them we never cash in on. We just don't. We never cash them out. For like home or car, the key is not to. And we spend thousands and thousands of dollars on insurance. Think about this as insurance. I mean, that's really what it is. It's just a small insurance policy. And considering the cost rolled up in a bug out bag or something that's fairly mediocre, right? This stuff, although for some it can be pricey, in terms of comparing it to today's insurance policies, it's really not. And you can use the stuff. You can use the stuff for camping and everything else. And so it's just sort of a win-win in my opinion. So again, there's some options for water. I also have some things here where if you need to purify water while walking, maybe you don't have the time to stop, there's things that are tablets which will sterilize or treat the water. And also as well, how can you collect water? There's a variety of means of collecting water, from dew from the grass or whether rain from the air. Again, that starts to come with the whole knowledge piece. I have fire as a separate category with a whole lot of means of fire and ensuring that those matches or Bic lighters or whatever you have, that you're storing them in watertight containers. Food. I have a couple things here where you do want to bring, again, these bug out bags really are only for 3 days. There's not a whole lot else you can fit and still have a manageable weight unless you're taking your car and you know that you're going to have some other means of transportation. But you want to have at least 72 hours of food for the people that are in your party, as well as means to cook the food. You have to understand that some of the dehydrated meals where you just add hot water are pretty good. If you intend on bringing beans or something, maybe you don't have the funds for those really fancy dehydrated meals and you're just going to bring things like rice or beans. Those take a lot of energy to cook. It takes a lot of heat and a lot of energy boiling that water for a considerable amount of time for the beans or the rice to be editable. And so you need to think about, how are you going to cook? Are you going to have a small portable stove? Again, that relates up to the fire. Do you have all the skills or materials necessary to start that fire? For me, it's been a little while and I might be rusty, but I do know how to make fire by hand just by rubbing sticks together. But my wife wouldn't, so she needs a Bic lighter, and I have a little small MSR white propane tank for her with a little stove on it. And so that's perfectly fine for her. It will eventually run out, but for her skill level, she's not going to go out in the field with me and rub sticks together. Let's be honest. So for her and her skill set, that's appropriate. And so just think about, your food and how you're going to cook it. some quick things like power bars or something that you can have on the go. And then, if you want to think out, a little bit further and you have the skill set, there's things like fishing kits that are very small. You can find those on Amazon pretty easy. Frog gigs, which are essentially just small spears. You could also use those for fishing, and animal snares. And again, some of these things are going to have more knowledge and skill set associated with them. So you just have to discern those, whether they're right for you or not. I have tools split up into a separate category. I'm probably not going to go into this in detail because there's a whole lot of different tools that you can bring. And some of those tools, especially like you need a knife sharpener. I would also recommend, in addition to a knife, you have a saw. I also have some other things here in terms of paracord. Really, outside of paracord, if you haven't heard of this, bank line, actually that's the little ad right here. Again, you don't have to buy it through me or anything like that, but just be aware of it. Bank cord is sort of tarred twine, and it's extremely strong and it's extremely cheap compared to paracord. Honestly, I carry a roll of bank line. I don't even carry paracord really anymore. The only time I carry paracord is just because I've had it and it's just there. But I really don't want to buy paracord anymore. All my shelters and everything that I've ever built is through bank line because it is so cheap, and they've got different tensile strengths, and they are just as strong or stronger than paracord, and you can just have so much more of it for such a better cost-effective price point. And so do check that out if you haven't heard of bank line instead of paracord. But again, you can look through some of these tools here. It's not an all-encompassing list. There's some things that I spoke about in prior videos, which some people aren't aware about. Tools like small bolt cutters. They actually make some ones that are about 8 inches tall. So if you think about escape and evasion and fencing and things like that, if you look at a lot of the refugee crisis that was happening over in Europe, there's a lot of photos where these refugees were coming up on razor wire. And so a very small 8-inch pair of bolt cutters would be very useful. It's going to be a little bit heavy, but again, very useful, again, to try to get your family to safety and escape to a different area. So lots of things to think about in terms of the tools. Security, that's an interesting topic that I've been sort of avoiding in terms of talking about from a faith-based perspective, but perhaps we'll talk about that at some point. Maybe I'll have a guest on the show as well, because we as Christians have different interpretations of whether it is justifiable to protect yourself or not. In the beginning of my walk, I was very much apt to say that I will always defend myself in my life. But as I walk this walk with Christ, I'm sort of subsiding in that a little bit, to be honest. I'm actually, sort of thinking that maybe I should just give myself up in some circumstances. Again, just for me personally. I think I'm just going to have to wait for the situation to present itself to see whether or not I should try to escape, or should I defend myself, or should I give myself over. I think the Holy Spirit will convict you accordingly. But that's for me and myself. In terms of other people, and this is a very prudent conversation just because of the Texas church shooting that just happened, I think instinctually, especially as men who are leaders and protectors of the family, I think if there are other Christian brothers or sisters, or even non-Christians, if there's people that are in danger and it's lethal, deadly danger, and you have a means to stop it, I think instinctually, if you're a brave man, you're going to react and defend and use lethal force if necessary. Again, I still feel that way. I'm starting to subside a little bit in terms of my own life and saving my own life, so to say. But I still feel very compelled to protect others if that arises and I have the means to do it. So that might be another interesting topic. But again, if you are into concealed carry and you think about firearms and ammunition or other means of protecting yourself, whether you want to do non-lethal like tasers, even mace, those are things that you should seriously consider for security. Travel planning, I'm going to skip over this for right now, but I'm going to come back to it and maybe end with this. Actually, there's the bolt cutters. I didn't forget that. But let's go back to the travel planning in just a second. I do have a couple items here for communication. In addition to some of the ham radios or walkie-talkies that you want, I also have in my family members' bags whistles, just in case we have to separate or we get separated, that there's a way that we can figure out where one another's are. Medical and hygiene. There's a whole bunch of stuff in here which requires medical expertise. And so a lot of this I probably wouldn't suggest for everyone, but there's a lot of things that you probably should have. I think everyone should know how to use a tourniquet. I think everyone should have some general bandages and gauze rolls, as well as things for vomiting and diarrhea. Those are the two things that are killers, out in the wild. If you happen to have a sickness and you go to the emergency room, one of the things that they're going to prescribe you, probably, if it's a pretty bad case, at least in terms of vomiting, is Zofran. And that stuff just works amazing wonders. They have like little dissolve ready tabs, and it will stop vomiting and actually stop the whole cascade of vomiting. Usually if you have vomiting that is like 24 hours and you can't hold down anything, you take one of these, and it is prescription, but it'll stop the cycle. It really will. So its effective range is like 8 hours, but the fact that you get that 8 hours downtime, your body sort of reboots, if you will, and it actually helps you to prevent vomiting from days thereafter. So if you happen to have any of that, you get prescribed 20 pills, and you only use a couple of them because that's really all you need to stop the cycle. Save them and put them in your bug out bag, because again, vomiting and diarrhea, and think about any other type of medications you might need, especially if you have any personal health issues. Keep that in your medical bag. But you can go through here, and I've got a lot of different things, blood clotting agents and other items, nail clippers even, something that we typically forget about. Hygiene, remember, so this isn't just medical, it's also hygiene. Hygiene is incredibly important. I have a small bar of soap as well as toothpaste and paste and things like that in there. Just the little things that you need to think about and what all you can fit in that bag. And then lastly here, there's some other items, like if you want to carry cash, if you have a safe, you have some cash on hand, you also put in your bug out bag. Some people are into gold and silver if you're into that. But psychological survival, again, that's some of the things I spoke about with regards to my daughter's little Lammy. And here you can see, pictures of the family. That's something that can be very motivational, something that can keep you sane. Caffeine tablets. I haven't actually seen that in a lot of bug out bag items. That's a very cheap and good thing to have. If you think that you're going to be displaced and you're going to be on the move, you're going to be exhausted, you're not going to have a time for a cup of joe, you're not going to have time to brew a coffee, have some caffeine tablets. And there's also some military caffeine gum, but you can see $25. That's crazy. $8 for caffeine tablets. It's a good thing in terms of psychological survival and how you can keep yourself awake. And other things here, if you're into essential oils, sometimes just scents help. There's some that are anti-anxiety essential oils. And so some people carry those. It's all up to you. But the fact that you bucket this out, psychological survival, as its own thing, and you think about that if you were in a really terrible situation, what are the little creature comforts that might help you get by? For some people, it may be even candy. Just having, if you think about the soldiers, in war, having a Hershey's chocolate bar, after they've eaten those MREs and everything for so long, it is a real psychological boost. Don't underestimate the power of something so simple as just having some little lozenges of candy or things of that nature for the purpose of your psyche and just having your, good mood. Now, going back up here, and I'll just cover this last one here, and then we'll probably end the live stream. But travel planning, I've got things in here where on my website there are some courses that it's free. It's just really PDFs that were free, open source from other websites. But there are some sources where you can learn about navigation, with a compass and maps and everything like that. So a lot of these things here are in relation to that. terms of having ranger beads, a protractor, the maps, the compass, a waterproof map carrier, and if you're really not into that, maybe a GPS unit. But outside of that, I have a couple people that I prepare with. And one of the things that we always, we get together maybe, we wish it would be every month, but maybe it's like every quarter we get together. And every single time we get together, it all comes down to, if something really were to happen, exactly where are we going? And we have no idea. We have absolutely no idea. And, I would not recommend trying to find prepper communities. I certainly would not recommend finding militias in your area. Absolutely not. It's just there's some good people in there, but it's just not good. Just trust me. Rather, I would say, try to talk with your friends and family about what's going on and hopefully prepare with them. And if even better, if you can find your, fellowship, people in fellowship that believe that we're in the time of the end and they see the signs and the times, you prepare with them. That's even better. People that are of like-minded faith. Those are the people you should try to be finding community with and having discussions in terms of where are we going to go in case something were to happen. But back to the story, every time we meet, we don't know where to go. It's actually sort of funny because we joke with each other like, yeah, so where are we going now? We're just going to like run out into the cornfields or something. And no one really has an answer. And that's the difficult thing, is because, and that's why I brought up the whole prepper community versus family / faith-based community, is when you look at the prepper and militia communities, there's a lot of lack of trust. There's a lot of lack of trust. And so someone might have a property that everyone could go to, but they don't trust you all because you're not family, you're really not friends. And so they really don't want to disclose their place to you. And so that's what really, creates tension and things like that, and why you want to avoid it. But with friends and family and faith-based communities, you really want to figure out where are we going? Because with us, it always comes down to that. We don't really exactly have a place. And once we do have a place, I think that a lot of the nerves would be settled a little bit, even though we're supposed to not worry. Again, as I walk with Christ, I'm starting to get less and less focused on the physical preparedness and more focused on trying to get my heart right and trying to do edifying Bible studies and teachings with all of you so that you can get your heart right. Because that is truly the preparedness, right? Is we see the signs of the times. Everyone's saying, get ready, get ready, get ready. And so instinctually, we're going and we're researching more, we're acquiring more knowledge, saying, what is it going to be? When is it going to be? But just knowing and acknowledging the signs of the times. Because, right, we sort of do this. We sort of put ourselves on this pedestal. There's a whole bunch of Christians that either aren't seeing the signs of the times, or they're seeing them, but they're really not acknowledging them for what they are. But the fact that we see them and we acknowledge them, we are quote unquote ready. And I don't think that is truth. I think that we need to get ready in terms of, pruning our heart and making sure that we don't shrink back at his coming because we are ashamed at, basically of our walk. And we talked about that in the last video, having confidence in your salvation and acquiring that confidence through walking in fellowship with him and abiding with him and, gaining confidence over time. Just like a marriage, you gain greater confidence over time throughout that marriage, and there's very low divorce rate after you get over that 10-year mark or whatever it is, that you're just really growing together and you're inseparable. And so that is, again, foremost primary thing that we need to get ready for, is search our lives, search our hearts, and see, where exactly we may not be operating in Christ. I think, for me, I've taught a lot about different false doctrines and knowledge and teaching and things like that and how to be prepared. I've also talked about how to prevent deception and make sure that, you're really trying to battle your flesh because I've shown that the Lord will give some people up to what they really want. So if your flesh is continually desiring something that is not of God, and your conscience or your mind starts to bear witness with what your flesh wants as well, the Lord can give you up to that. And so you want to, be cognizant of that and just say, Lord, prune this stuff from my mind, clear my conscience. That is not what I want. And, if we happen to make a mistake, he's faithful and he will forgive. But again, we want to try to, keep that war against the flesh and keep it at bay. Paul even says, he trains his body, he disciplines his body so that, he doesn't give way to the flesh. But, love is also just another tough thing. We can have this knowledge and we can, be aware of all the false doctrines, but it's an incredibly difficult thing to love your enemies. And that is hard. And so that's like one of the things that I'm thinking of in terms of getting ready for this time is, if there's someone that's my enemy, I am at the point where I don't seek revenge on my enemies. But again, I still harbor bad feelings and things like that. I'm always going to forgive afterwards, but it's a difficult thing. And so those are some of the things we really, 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 really need to be thinking about. And I hope you think about them as well. So anywho, I hope you guys like the new format. I'm enjoying this little live stream thing. I get a whole bunch of cool toys. I actually got an outro, so you can see what that looks like and give me some comments. But the live stream is really going to enable me to put out more content because it is so easy to just record live and all the rendering and the upload is automatically taken care of, and that just saves me an incredible amount of time, something that is running or fleeting from my life every single day. But also it increases the risk that I'm going to say something stupid, so I appreciate forgiveness if I say anything dumb while I'm on the live camera. So anywho, I hope you all enjoyed that, and I'll look forward to the next video, maybe do this on a weekly basis. And so for now, let's check out the new outro video.